All right, then hi and welcome to our final presentation. Our project was modeling CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy in body dysmorphic disorder, and also comparing that to the existence of a social support network. Okay, so first of all, what is body dysmorphic disorder? Body dysmorphic disorder is a psychological disorder characterized under obsessive compulsive disorders in the DSM-5. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychological Diseases. Body dysmorphia is characterized
But maybe you can come a few sentences back.
All right, I'll start again. So individuals with body dysmorphic disorder are characterized by first a preoccupation with one or more perceived flaws in their appearance that appear to themselves really big, but to others they don't really notice it at all, or they appear minor. And this leads the individuals with body dysmorphic disorder to engage in repetitive behaviors, for example, mirror checking or reassurance seeking in response to their concerns about their appearance. And that causes them clinically significant distress or impairment in social areas, occupational areas, or, well, any other areas in life, basically. And fourthly, the concerns do not correspond to an eating disorder or to an occupation with body fat. So that is a separate disorder in the characterization. And it is important to note that BDD is a serious issue. It results in poor life quality. And of all body-related disorders, it is known to have the most significant link to depression and also suicidal behavior. And most people with body dysmorphic disorder who are diagnosed with it are women, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect men. It just could also mean that men have are more resistant to seek help in that domain.
Yeah. And so in this model, we're trying to model cognitive behavioral therapy. This is the therapy that is quite commonly used nowadays, especially associated with anxiety disorder. And this therapy approach is based on the Aaron Beck's model of negative triad. So he had this model invited quite a few decades ago, and he named the negative cognition as automatic, spontaneous, and seemingly uncontrollable negative thoughts about self, world, and future. And theirs is this triad of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. They sort of reinforce each other, and it forms a very negative cycle. So this it's basically referring to the preoccupation with flaws will lead to self-defeating interpretations and thoughts of themselves, as well as negative feelings. So once you have those negative beliefs and thoughts about yourself, that would lead to negative moods, such as you would deny your self-worthiness, that would lower your self-esteem, you would find distress or depression, but also in order to release that emotion, you would seek for some compensatory behavior. So for example, in BDD, you would have very typical behavior. For example, you would plug your hair a lot, you pick your skins a lot, or you go to surgery to fix the part that you don't like. But that sort of compensatory behavior actually reinforces your negative thoughts, because it makes you believe in more that you have to correct that flawed part about yourself. So the CBT in the body dysmorphic disorder, the quite often used techniques are the exposure and cognitive therapy. Basically, the way of the therapy is trying to dig deeper into the cervical phenomenon. For example, you have a very flawed thoughts about your nose. You have a fixation that you have a very bad looking nose, but then the therapy would go deeper under that. So what does it mean that you have a big nose? What impacts would it lead to? And then it leads into the root of that bad thoughts. It's because probably you think having a bad nose would make you less favored by other people, or it would lead to bad judgment about other people. And it's trying to change your association with that cervical phenomenon and your negative thoughts, and trying to build more positive connections between the stimulus and your responses over in the long run. And we can see in this figure, which is a simplified schema of neurocognitive cognitive reactivity to a psychological stressor. So we can see when you have a stressor here, what is followed is the phase 2, which is the stress appraisal, and then you have the stress reactivity, which would also monitor your emotion and your selective attention. And if this bad circle goes on, and it will lead to a psychological problem. And the decision-making phase, we can also call like how it changes your behavior in different situations. But also there's a problem with CBT, because a lot of empirical research has done on CBT, and they find it very effective and efficacious in multiple situations of treating anxiety disorders. But also it's very important to dismantle these studies and choose the right way of treating different disorders, because under the umbrella term of anxiety disorders, there are also different forms of disorders. So that's why we decided to model this process.
Exactly. And how did we do that? First, I will give you an overview of the model, and then I will walk you through the different levels. So we created a self-modeling adaptive network where learning is represented through plasticity and metaplasticity. On the base level, we represented the pathological pathways that Cici has already kind of talked about a bit, that occur in diseases like, or in disorders like BDD. And on the other hand, we also created a healthy pathway that would be the option that the individuals would take. And on the base level, we also incorporated the CBT elements. I will talk about that later a bit more. Well, and basically the CBT elements will change the unhealthy pathways to a healthier way. And this change obviously is represented through learning. And this learning is represented on the first reification level through W states, and then again on the second level reification through H states, which basically just represent the speed of learning that takes place. All right, so on the base level, first, here you see the initial model with a tendency to the pathological pathway. So basically, what you see, this would be the pathway of a person who is affected by body dysmorphia. I will walk you through it a bit. So first, you get some sort of stimulus that can be external or internal. And now, basically, you have to look at it that you have the possibility to decide between two different pathways. This is the unhealthy pathway. This is the pathway of a person with body dysmorphic disorder. Basically, the stimulus will lead to selective attention, the person will fixate on their flaws, and this will result in a negative appraisal of their own body. This negative appraisal will then lead to that triangle that Cici just described, which is like a negative triad of negative thoughts, negative mood, and then the safety behaviors. The safety behaviors are those repetitive behaviors that I talked about before, for example, mirror checking, and they're supposed to lower the negative mood and the negative thoughts. The problem with it is that it also enhances the fixation on their flaws and basically just reinforces that unhealthy cycle. So the person herself with body dysmorphia is not really able to get out of the cycle. This here would be the healthy pathway with the broad attention, a fixation on positive aspects of oneself, a positive appraisal, and therefore like a positive triangle with positive mood, affirmative thoughts, and self-appreciative behavior. The thing is, a person with body dysmorphia is more likely to go this pathway. This is why these arrows are broader. And yeah, here would be two regulation mechanisms, self-monitoring and cognitive restructuring, which are there in a person affected with body dysmorphia, but they are just not strong enough for the person to switch to the healthy pathway. Which is why we thought we would secondly incorporate cognitive behavioral therapy. You can see it as like a external factor who kind of boosts those regulatory mechanisms, self-monitoring and cognitive restructuring. And they get influence from the negative mood and the rumination thoughts because they are meant to be like an alarm signal when you realize you have like bad thoughts, bad mood, and also selective attention, then those nodes will be activated and regulate your cognitive processes through inhibiting the selective attention and to boosting your positive appraisal, your positive focus, and a broad attention focus. So this is basically the idea how cognitive behavioral therapy and those two associated mechanisms can help switch the individual from the unhealthy pathway to the healthy pathway. And then this learning basically takes, this change in the structure takes place through learning. I already mentioned that. So this is represented on the second level through the W states. We use the Hebbian learning functions for that and also one context state. And I think I forgot to mention, like on the base level, we used allogistic functions. And for the CBT, we used the step once function because we didn't want it to be there all the time. We wanted to be there for a certain time span, which is what the step once function is for. And then the third level that I already mentioned, those are the speed factors for the Hebbian learning. They're represented with H's, and we use the allogistic function for this. We will not go through the role matrices because we have lots of different nodes and it will take up too much time. But if you're interested, you can always just ask us and we can send them to you.
So next, I'll explain the simulation, but the objectives of the simulation I've already explained earlier. So it's mainly to look at the effects of CBT, but also how social support network, mainly the positive one, would interact with the CBT. Also, we want to understand how CBT actually works on different elements in the dysfunctional cognitions in BDD. And so here's our expectation and hypothesis. We were thinking without the CBT, the pathological pathway in our model will be taken. So it doesn't mean the other pathway doesn't run at all. The other pathway also run, but also the positive appraisal in that pathway is too weak. So the negative appraisal overrides the positive appraisal, and it leads to more negative behavior, negative thoughts, and they cycle. So the second hypothesis is through implementing elements of CBT with adaptive learning, the positive pathway will be magnified and will override the negative pathway. And the third is social network might buffer the effects of BDD, but cannot alone reach the effect of CBT. So here is the first scenario. It's without therapy, but with social support network. No, without either of them. So without therapy and without social support network. So let's call this subject, for example, Leah. And we can see, is there another? Yeah, so this is the model of the simulation when there's no therapy and there was no positive social support. So we would assume that this pathway is very weak. So whenever you receive external stimuli, it would always lead to the selective attention, which also leads to fixation and then other negative cycles. And even though there's like a positive, negative direction that cancels out the effect of each other, but also because this pathway is too strong and also it inhibits the effect from the other pathway. So here you would see these lines with the flowers. They are the lines from the positive, the negative pathway, and you had the selective attention, and you would have floor fixation, negative appraisal, and that's the safety behavior. And also this AIR is the
autoimmune response of the body.
The immune responses of your body. So it's more like a physiological changes, the reaction to the negative pathway. But we can see that even though we have the, what is that, positive appraisal and positive focus, but the other things there are very low. So like this person doesn't have any feelings of happiness. It's stuck in this safety-seeking behavior, and then it's just she's very unhappy. And we can see the self-monitoring and the cognitive reconstruction is not functioning in this person. So that's why she's not really broadening her attention to other things, but fixed on the flawed stuff. So now we change into the second simulation, which is with therapy, but no positive social support. So that's the 3 arrows from CBT. And we also add the Hebbian learning function from CBT to SM and from CBT to CRC. So basically what CBT does is to help you learn self-monitoring and learn cognitive reconstruction. So what the self-monitoring means is your therapy might ask you to monitor, to be more aware of your thoughts, or to ask you to observe your feelings, or to record what you were feeling during the days. What is your feeling when you see this external presentation? So it largely enhances the self-monitoring and the cognitive reconstruction, which is to reconstruct your responses to when the stimuli is presented. And this orange line here is kind of thicker, so you can tell the therapy starts from the time point 20 and ends at 50. And therapy does like these lines with flowers, they are the lines from the negative pathway. So you can see they decrease largely during the therapy. And these lines without flowers, this one is the positive focus, and this one is the green one is the broader attention. So what it helps is self-monitoring also helps to broaden up your attention. So you're no longer fixing yourself on the appearance part. Maybe you're looking at something that is non-appearance related, or it's something, it's like it's your life achievement, or anything that makes you feel like you're more appraisal of yourself. So we can see they raise very quickly during the therapy, and these ones they maintain at a very high level. What drops afterwards is self-monitoring and the other ones. The orange one, this one, I think it's more related to the, I forgot what it's called. I'm not entirely sure of what it is. I think this line might be broad attention, but like these ones, I think these two, they're self-monitoring and cognitive reconstruction. Maybe it's because the broad attention is already high enough, so the self-monitoring will drop afterwards. So these are the curves of W states, basically showing how much it's learned.
And I just want to quickly add, like, because self-monitoring and cognitive reconstruction, they react to like the negative emotion states, and if they are resolved through the therapy, then they will not be that active afterwards. So that's another reason.
So here is the simulation of a scenario with positive social support but without therapy, and this is the social network, the positive social network, because we mainly want to look at how positive social network helps therapy or without therapy. So what mainly does is lower the negative mood and rumination thoughts, but also it increases positive mood and affirmative thoughts. And here we present two different values of positive social network, but there's a difference between strong social network and a weak social network. When the social support is very strong, it has a higher value. Here we put at minus 0.25 with connection weights, and you can see to later point, it effectively helps lower down the negative thoughts and rumination, negative mood and rumination, even though the selective attention is still very high. But by lowering down these lines, it helps to inhibit your, for example, your physiological changes or like your safety-seeking behavior. And also it helps the positive mood and positive thoughts to write afterwards. But this one is when the positive social network has a lower value, so it doesn't really have a strong effect on the negative pathway, but it also helps to lower down the level of negative thoughts and rumination. Yeah, but it doesn't help the positive ones to rise effectively. And this is the is it the final?
Yeah,
with
final.
Yeah, positive social network and therapy. So this one is with therapy and with social network. So we can see that they both kind of reach a similar effect at the end. But what is different is these are the rumination thoughts and the negative mood. They get lowered quite earlier and quite quickly. And even though the final effects is the same, but we can see that they reach to the zero level quite earlier than this one. And it might explain that when you have a very positive social network, it's very likely that you can shorten the duration of your therapy, but still reach the same effect afterwards.
Yeah.
So here's the conclusion part. For example, we want to say some limitations in our study. First is the lack of solid empirical data to address the setting of baseline parameters. So what we are trying to do in this model is try to make it work first, but there could be some parameters that is based on assumptions or hypotheses. Because in empirical studies, you only have subjective experience. And second, individual variances in cognition execution cannot be taken into account. So this model is kind of based on a perfect subject to make this work. But in different individuals, the parameters could be different and you might not reach the effect of therapy. And also, CBT therapy is also itself based on this theory by Aaron Beck. So the mechanism of BBD could also due to other reasons. Also, the model indicates an ideal situation and it doesn't really show the fluctuation of mood and thoughts because we can see they remain, after the therapy, they kind of remain at the same level, but as mood and thoughts, they always fluctuate during over time. So there should be a way to show the fluctuation of it. And also other therapy techniques such as that's more focusing on changing the behavior, such as relapse prevention or habit reversal training, which makes direct effect on behavior, is not taken into consideration in this model because we're mainly changing the thinking process of it.
Okay, and from kind of also for this reason and for thoughts of ourselves, we thought about some possibilities on how you could extend the model that we just presented you. First, you could possibly add more adaptive functions to different learning connections because multiple learning takes place in the brain at different stages and not just at the stages which are connected to CBT. So that would be a way to add like more connections. Also, it would be possible to break down the therapy elements like self-monitoring and cognitive restructuring into more tinier fractions of therapy processes because those two elements, they are still broad and it would be possible to break down the process even more. Additionally, it would be possible to add more context factors, for example, the work environment, the educational environment, or factors like social media usage, who could also influence people with body dysmorphia. And this would lead to like a more realistic context in which the therapy would take place in real life. And also it would be possible to not only examine like the influence of a positive social support network or not, but also the influence of negative social interactions or negative online social interactions, which could worsen symptoms of BDD, for example. And yeah, also what Cici already mentioned, maybe incorporating more individual predispositional factors like motivation or character traits to make this kind of model even more accurate for really a patient. And yeah, now the implications, what we could show through a model that elements of CBT, which are well known in literature, do in fact have the possibility to adjust dysfunctional cognitions in body dysmorphia disorder. A potentially critical part could be the training on a broad attention span, which is at the focus of, which was at the very start of our model and which has been in literature well demonstrated to have a big effect as well. And for us as well, while we try to make the model work, that connection was really crucial. So that might also be a really important aspect in therapy. And yeah, since many other related disorders, like other obsessive compulsive disorders, also anxiety disorders have similar brain mechanisms happening, like models like this could also maybe be applied to other disorder fields. And yeah, as for an application, we think that models like this can help to create a more effective, more targeting and more personalized therapy. For that, it would need to be combined with proper measurements like psychometric tests or subject self-report to like create a more individual model. But we think that something like this could help to predict therapy outcomes and also predict what would happen after therapy, because that was kind of like the crucial part in our model. What will happen to the learned cognitions and to the self-regulatory mechanisms after therapy? And also that is well known, like the phase after therapy, if it is clinical or if it is stationary or just like ambulant therapy, doesn't matter. Like the phase after is really critical in every psychological disorders. You have like the highest rates of suicide after the therapy. So studying that phase afterwards and what happens to the learned cognitions is really important. Yeah, also like if you would have such a model, it would also help to distribute the resources in the clinic and to like make more individual and fitting plans for patients. Yeah, and this is it. Thank you for your attention.